doctors. Welcome international doctors to this webinar created especially for you, for doctors who would really like to improve their spoken English. Just a reminder that this webinar will be recorded, so you can turn off your camera if you don't care to be recorded. Comment or ask questions at any time in the chat box, and your KIST PDF will be available at the end of the presentation. Okay. So it was created especially for international doctors committed to improving their spoken English. So we're going to go through these things. This is what you can expect during this webinar. Hello, Carla. Good to see you. Why it's important to get this right. It seems like kind of a small issue, but I'm going to tell you how important it really is to get those ED endings correct. Then I'm going to tell you 3 ways to pronounce that ED ending, the 3 ways. And then I'm going to give you the KISS principle. Keep it simple, sweetie. And then I'm going to give you a great opportunity for continued support from me. And also you'll be able to get your PDF at the end. So, what confuses the American listener? I speak to international doctors every day who really feel like they can't be understood by their patients and coworkers because of their accent. They always tell me, just yesterday I had someone say, I think that my accent is interfering with my ability to communicate with my coworkers and patients. And I always tell them, it's not your accent. They're always really surprised to hear that. It's not your accent. In fact, here in the United States, we have variety of accents. My accent here in Texas is very different than in New York or Boston or California. And we have a really a high tolerance for our accented English within our country. So it's not really about your accent. What the problem really is that you're not meeting the expectations of the listener, and that results in miscommunications. And so you'd be surprised to know that really it's all about the syllables. So it's not really about whether you have an accent or not, it's about the syllables. You see, English is a stress time language. That means some syllables are longer and stronger and other syllables are reduced. So English is a stress time language. So is German and Russian and European Portuguese and even Arabic. Those are all stress time languages. Other languages are syllable timed languages, which means all the syllables are roughly equal. And those include Spanish, Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese, Chinese, Turkish, Korean, actually Mandarin and Cantonese, and some other languages, and Spanish, if I didn't say Spanish. So those are all syllable timed languages. And so all the syllables kind of sound the same. And this is a big problem for American listeners. Okay, so it's a big problem if you're not stressing properly, if you're stressing a different syllable than we're expecting, or if you're adding or dropping syllables. That's a huge problem for American listeners as well. So why is it a problem with the ED endings? Well, the problem is a lot of English language learners tend to fully pronounce that ED ending. So they're pronouncing it as a separate syllable every time. But in fact, we only really add that extra syllable just a few times, which I'll get into in a minute. Most of the time, it's all combined with the letters before. And so that means a lot of times you're adding a syllable where I'm not expecting. And that is a huge problem. As soon as you've added a syllable, then I have to do mental gymnastics to kind of catch up with you. And by the time I've pieced it together, what it is that you're saying, you've already finished your thought and I didn't hear any of it. So it is important to know how to pronounce these ED endings so that you can match the expectation of the American listener. So I wanted to show you this sheet, which used to be in a textbook that I used when I taught in community college. So this was the kind of chart that you would get if you were going to take this lesson in a community college using a textbook. And it is like so confusing. Oh my gosh, how can you ever remember all this stuff? There's no way. Well, I've got good news for you today. You don't need a chart. Yay! You don't need a chart. I can tell you how to get through this process without a chart. Okay. Well, I am going to have a chart, but it's only for practice, but you don't need this kind of chart. Okay, let's go. So what's the trick? The trick is just I'm going to walk you through this process. Okay, but once you understand the process, it'll be simple. So it's going to be slow this time, but once you learn the process, then you'll understand. First, you isolate the final sound of the base word. Don't worry, we're going to practice this in a minute. So you isolate the last sound of the base word. So if the word is kiss, then the last sound is s. Okay, so without the ed ending, what is the final sound? S. All right. So now, if you put your hand on your throat as you say that final sound, I hope you're doing it with me. Do it with me. Put your hand on your throat and say, S. Okay? S. Be careful to say just the name of the letter, not the sound, but the sound only. Just S. Okay, so are your vocal cords vibrating? Do you feel any vibration? No, you don't. So that means if it's not vibrating, it's an unvoiced sound. So let's try another word, the word learned. Okay, so the final sound is the N sound, or mm. Now put your hands on your throat and let's say the N sound. Mm, mm. Do you feel your vocal cords vibrating? Yes, you do. So let's do both of those. Let's do the S. No vibration. Yes, vibration. So you have a voiced sound and an unvoiced sound. So first you isolate that final sound, then you decide, is that final sound voiced or unvoiced? Okay, so that's the first trick. So without using the chart, you can figure that out. So let's see. Let's do that. So here's an example. So the word dance, the final sound, remember it's not the letters, it's the sound. The final sound is s. It's unvoiced, right? It's unvoiced. So with the ED pronunciation, it's actually since it's unvoiced, it's a T sound. Danced, danced, danced. We danced all night. We danced all night. Say it with me. We danced all night. All right, so the next one is play. Let's put our hands here. Play. A voiced. So it's played. Played with a D. He played the drums. He played the drums. He played the drums. What about the word start? Actually, that's a T. If it's a T or a D, now we add another syllable. Started, started. She started to cry. She started to cry. Started, started. You see, it's two syllables. Amuse, amused. He was amused. He was amused. He was amused. Okay, laugh. Now, that's crazy because it's a GH, but the last sound is an F sound. Unvoiced. Laughed, laughed. I laughed so hard. I laughed so hard. Now, sound. It's a D. So it adds another syllable. Sounded, sounded. He sounded happy. He sounded happy. You see? So that's some practice for you. So what are the rules? We can see rule 1, if the word base ends in a voiceless sound, then the ed ending sounds like the t, 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 t. So let's see, like this, danced, laughed. You see? If the word ends in a if the word base ends in a voice sound, remember your vocal cords are vibrating, then the ed ending sounds like a D. Okay, so played, played, amused, amused. Here's how you don't say it though. You don't say danced, danced, no, danced. Played, no, played. Started, yes, 2 syllables. Amused, no, amused. Laughed, no, laughed. Sounded, yes, 2 syllables there. Okay? So, if the word base ends in a T or a D sound already, then the ed ending sounds like id, like that extra syllable. And let me just tell you, most of the time, we do not add that extra syllable because there are a lot fewer words that end in a T or a D sound than all the rest of the sounds combined. So it's very uncommon that you will be adding that extra syllable. Okay, so I hope that helps. Now I'm going to make it even more simple. The number one thing is make sure you don't add an extra syllable to the word unless for the rule number 3. And what was the rule number 3? If the base word ends in a T sound or a D sound, then you add that extra syllable. Everything else, do not have an extra syllable or you're going to mess with me. I won't be able to understand you. It will take too much effort for me to do those mental gymnastics to figure out what you're saying. Now, here's some really good news. If you can't remember whether you should pronounce the ending as that T or D sound, like laughed, like that T sound, or learned the D sound, don't worry about it because really you can use either sound and it still will be fine, okay? It actually will if you forget. You don't actually have to hold your hand here and figure it out. Because the sound difference between that a T and a D are so small, you really can't even tell the difference. And in fact, I have to tell you that that D sound, the ending sound with the D, is actually the most common of any of them. So if you're going to decide, well, I don't know when to pronounce it as a T sound or a D sound. If you go with a D sound, it'll work all the time, okay? So really, there's really only two things you have to decide. Does it add an extra syllable because it ends in a T or a D, the base word? All the rest of them, you could just do a D and it would be okay. I'm gonna prove it to you in just a minute. That's how I'm keeping it simple, sweetie. Okay. All right, so now you try. Let's try it now. So here are some medical terms that you'll probably need to know. So let's figure out what is the ED word is dehydrated. See, it ends in a T, dehydrate. Ends in a T, so we need an extra syllable. Dehydrated, dehydrated, dehydrated. It's easy for the elderly to become dehydrated in this heat. It's easy for the elderly to become dehydrated in this heat. Come on, do it with me. It's easy for the elderly to become dehydrated in this heat. One more time. It's easy for the elderly to become dehydrated in this heat. So that is rule 3. It ends in a T sound, so we have to have that extra syllable. Okay, let's figure out the next one. The ED word is ruled. So it's the L sound, oh. Okay, so my voice box is vibrating. It's a voiced sound. So that means the ED ending should sound like a D, ruled, ruled. The biopsy ruled out several illnesses. The biopsy ruled out several illnesses. Come on, do it with me. The biopsy ruled out several illnesses. The biopsy ruled out several illnesses. Okay? Now, if I couldn't remember if it was a D or a T, and I just put a T, the biopsy ruled out, it's so small. I don't think you could hear it. It would be okay. Okay, the next one, rushed. So shh, shh, unvoiced. So that means the ED sounds like a T sound. The child was rushed into the ER. The child was rushed into the ER. Do it with me. The child was rushed into the ER. One more time. The child was rushed into the ER. What if I forget if it's T or D and I say the child was rushed into the ER? You can't hear it between the T and the D. No big deal. All right, the next one, concerned. So concern, so it's a D sound. The doctor was concerned about my family history of skin cancer. The doctor was concerned about my family history of skin cancer. The doctor was concerned about my family history of skin cancer. Come on, do it with me. The doctor was concerned about my family history of skin cancer. The doctor was concerned about my family history of skin cancer. All right, the next one is the last one. Oh, actually, there's two in this one. It's a bonus. So prevent, it ends with a T, so we have to add that other syllable. Prevented, prevented. And the same thing with infected. So it's the T sound, okay? The antibiotics prevented the wound from getting infected. The antibiotics prevented the wound from getting infected. I'll go slow. The antibiotics prevented the wound from getting infected. A little faster. The antibiotics prevented the wound from getting infected. The antibiotics prevented the wound from getting infected. I hope you were able to keep up with me. So I want to tell you my story, and you're going to do something like this on your own. I wrote out my story about someone who really influenced me. And then I went back and I highlighted all of the words that ended in the ED. And so we'll kind of slow down in those areas and see how they're pronounced. Okay, so here's my story. In June of 2018, I was contacted by a Vietnamese doctor who wanted to improve his English. He had found me in a roundabout way and confessed that he had chosen me because he liked the name of my business, Houston ELP. He had visited Houston before and enjoyed our diverse city, the home of the Texas Medical Center. What this doctor didn't realize was that I had all but given up on my dream of having my own business teaching English. Houston ELP was dying, and he was my last client. But before closing the business, I was determined to pour everything I had into this one last client, this doctor, and help him realize his dream of practicing medicine in the United States. As a certified accent modifications specialist, I was able to accurately diagnose his struggles with his spoken English. Step by step, he improved and became more and more confident in his ability to communicate. During our sessions, he also mentioned an upcoming exam that he had to take, the USMLE Step 2 CS exam. Now, we don't have that exam anymore, I know, but this was a couple years ago, okay? I had never heard of Step 2 before, so I asked him more questions about how I could help with his specific requirements. That conversation put me on a path that would dramatically change the course of my career. No more general English teaching for me. From that point on, I would focus exclusively on the professional medical communication demands of international doctors like you. I was shocked to learn how international doctors who wish to practice medicine in the US must overcome many hurdles, including become certified by the ECFMG, taking the USMLE 3-step high stakes exam, and then matching into a residency program. This licensure process is required even for experienced doctors, with very few exceptions, who have been practicing medicine in their home country for years. I learned about all the requirements to pass the Step 2 CS exam and heard this disheartening stories of international doctors who had failed the exam solely because of their spoken English. It became my passion to develop a program to help doctors connect with their standardized patients with confidence and compassion, overcoming spoken English challenges. Soon, even physicians, scientists, and established doctors began contacting me for help with communicating with patients, coworkers, and colleagues. I began working with more and more private clients, celebrating each time there was a passed exam, a new position, or a well-received presentation. I was on my way to building a thriving business, something exciting and important. When the COVID crisis hit March 2020, my clients were severely impacted. Some found themselves at ground zero, their hospitals admitting hundreds of patients with the virus. No matter their official capacities, they cared for the critically ill patients in the emergency departments. Some had all their research efforts diverted to investigate possible vaccines and treatments. My clients preparing for the Step 2 CS exam were dismayed when the testing centers closed with no clear path for reopening. Again, my efforts have changed course. Now I am focused on helping as many international doctors as possible. So after years of experience as an English language specialist coaching private clients, I have created this 10-day English for Doctors group course challenge. This means that more and more international doctors will have access to the content found in my premium course, but at a very affordable price. I am committed to learning as much as I can about medical communication so I can continue to improve my course, serving those who serve. That's you. By the way, remember that Vietnamese doctor that was my first IMG, the guy that started it all? He passed his Step 2 CS exam and continued to work with me to prepare for residency interviews. And I'm proud to announce that he matched in March of 2021. I'm so happy and proud for him. So that's my story, and that's all my ED endings. Did you hear how I did the endings? I hope that you can do the same thing with your story. So here's your assignment. You want to write a story about a person who has influenced your career. Make sure you check your grammar, okay? Highlight all the words that have ed endings. That would be past tense verbs and also past participles that turn into adjective. He was concerned, okay? Determine which rule applies. Was it rule 1 that you pronounce it like a T, the ed ending like a T, or rule 2, you pronounce it like a D? Remember, 1 and 2 are kind of interchangeable. Or number 3, with an extra syllable, okay? With an extra syllable should be rare. Use the KISS principle, either add a syllable or don't. That's really the whole purpose. Practice your story, paying special attention to the words ending in the ed, and then record it and get a practice buddy to give you feedback. So that's how you practice something like this, not with a textbook, not with a huge chart. I've given you really 2 rules syllable or not, okay? Syllable or not, T or D, or either one. It's fine. It won't matter. So that's really all you have to remember. This is the way that you can practice it. Practice it with your own story. By the way, you want to work on the story. Why? Because it can be part of your personal statement that you're going to need when you apply for residency. So you might as well start writing down your stories right now. It's not too early. It's not too early.